echo of the forest. She heard the twang of a bowstring beyond the glade. The arrow hummed through the air like a beam of light, nicking her upper arm to leave a stripe of blood. Echo felt a searing pain. She squealed, dropped her basket of herbs, then darted from the undergrowth. Crouching among the ferns, she looked behind to see the arrow quivering in a branch. In the space beneath the tree's roots lay her den and wood-framed pack, but she had no time to collect her belongings. She leapt to her feet and sprinted along a faint path through the bracken as another arrow whizzed past her ear. She came to a clearing, startling in the dozen red deer that scattered in fright. She dashed across to the far side and huddled down. Taking deep breaths, the shadows of the ferns mingled with the brown markings that dappled her arms and legs, adding extra camouflage to her flame red and short, russet-colored dress. Echo peeped out from her hiding place, her hazel eyes scanning the glade, where early morning light slanted through the fans of oak leaves. Moments later, her pursuer charged out from the trees opposite. She gasped as she recognized the burly, bearded man, his hair a dark mane, his outfit of black horsehide. His name was Wulfric, a forester who a year earlier had fought alongside the enemy at the siege of Evil Hold, when Echo's parents and all their friends had been killed. She knew why Wulfric had tracked her to this part of Wicca Forest. A week before, on a moonless night, Echo had raided the castle of Lord Hugo de Morton and stolen the tax money he had collected from his starving people. She returned the money to the village folk, causing the enraged Lord Hugo to put up a reward for her capture, dead or alive. Wulfric lurched out onto the center of the glade, longbow and arrow at the ready. A rustling in the undergrowth distracted him. He spun around and released his arrow, narrowly missing the wild boar as it retreated to the tangle of bushes. Echo shot out from her hiding place and raced across towards the forester. Then Wulfric saw his young attacker and reached for his quiver and took out another arrow, notching it in his bow. Echo performed a handspring and took off in a series of forward flick-flacks, flipping over and over. As Wulfric loosened his arrow, Echo leaped up and out of its path, completing a high double somersault over the forester's head to land soft-footed behind him. Wulfric whirled around, and in the same moment, Echo sprang up and spun into midair to unleash a flying drop kick, the soles of her deerskin boots drilling into his chest. With a cry, Wulfric toppled over and hit the ground with a bone-shaking force. The wind knocked out of him. Echo caught her breath and stood a pace away, snatching up Wulfric's bow, then breaking it over her knee. "See the cowardly stink-toes who cannot even fight a girl of 12 years, she said. Slowly, the forester sat up, gulping for air. The sweat glistened on his forehead. He fixed her with narrow, cat-like eyes. "Breaking my bow will do thee no good," he snarled, his face contorted with fury. "Thou hast vexed the lord of this manor for many weeks, but soon thou wilt be dead like thy parents. Mine arrows are tipped with poison more deadly than an adder's tongue." "I am of dryad blood," Echo reminded him. "I have only to touch the living wood of a tree to be cured of all illness." Wulfric bared his rotten teeth as he laughed in triumph. "Not if I take thee clear of the forest." Echo looked at her arm. The edges of her wound were white and blotchy as if stung by many nettles. Part of her wanted to attack this man with his own sword, but she couldn't bring herself to kill. "Already the poison is working," said Wulfric. "There is a price on thine head. The reward will be mine." As he struggled to stand, Echo aimed a sidekick at the forester's chest, but Wulfric was too fast, and he grabbed her foot with both hands, wrenching sharply, causing Echo to twist in the air as her other foot left the ground. She landed face down, and Wulfric dragged her towards him, grabbing first her dress, then a fistful of long red hair. He placed a strong hand between her shoulder blades, pinning her down. Echo squirmed and lashed out with all her strength, back-fisting Wulfric in the end of his nose. He yelled and released his grip, clutching his face as he rolled to one side. Echo vaulted away in a handspring before landing on her feet. "'Tis no use fighting," said a voice in her head. "If poison is in my blood, then I must escape." She hurled across the glade, looking back to see Wulfric on his feet, lumbering after her. With a cry, he took another arrow from his quiver, waving it like a dagger. Echo slipped between the two holly bushes, then ran along the mossy path. Red hair streamed behind her, the trees flashing past. She heard Wulfric's shrieks beyond the rough wilderness, ended the edge of a steep ravine. A fast-flowing stream was some 20 yards below. Over her left she saw a long, narrow tree trunk spanning the ravine. She dashed to the makeshift bridge, then quickly crossed it with arms outstretched. At the other side she paused to wipe the drops of blood trickling from her wound. She looked across the ravine to see Wulfric emerging near the beech tree. He spotted her and headed for the bridge, still waving the poisoned arrow. Echo crouched down at the place where the trunk met the ground. Even her injured arm, she had greater strength than most adults. Teeth clenched and muscles straining, she took hold of the trunk, pulled it hard, dislodging it from the opposite bank, and sent it tumbling to the stream far below. "Thou cannot catch me now," she called, "thou measly-mouthed nut-hook with a face like a hound's bottom." "Catch thee I will," Wulfric roared back, raising a fist, "thou toad-spotted knavelet." With this he began to scramble down the steep side of the ravine. Echo looked again at her wounded arm. For the tree magic to work, she had to make contact with living wood, but Wulfric had already threatened to drag her clear of the forest. She decided to escape through the treetops, so she could not track her. She hurried to the forest and came to a huge chestnut tree, the gnarls of broken branches on its trunk offering many footholds. Her arm was beginning to stiffen, but she managed to climb up, wrestling, as she came to a thick bough. She clambered higher and then shinned across where the branches connected with another tree. Taking a deep breath, she leapt across, soaring from tree to tree like a squirrel until she was in the densest part of Wicca Forest. But now she was losing the feeling of her fingertips, and her body felt cold and sweaty as the poison took hold. With one final leap, she landed on the limbs of a huge ancient oak tree. Some of its branches were dead, but others awakening into new spring leaf. Her stomach began to clench, her arms and legs shuddering. She found it hard to swallow. She saw the moment below shifting of the ivy at the top of the tall trunk. Two large eyes appeared as a tawny owl flew out, hooting in surprise. She was saved. The tree was hollow. She scrambled to the top of the trunk, jabbing her toes at the place where the owl had appeared. Filling an empty space beyond the ivy, a few more kicks revealed a hole wide enough to take her. She began to slip down, parting the strands of ivy with her feet, before sliding her legs inside. She stretched up her arms and slithered into the trunk until her world became clammy and dark. Only now, with the hole out of reach, did she realize her mistake. The trunk was taller and narrower than she had thought. Her hips stuck. Her eyelids became as heavy as iron, her body quivering as a venom coursed through her veins. Her tongue turned to stone, and strength ebbed from her limbs. In her stunned mind, she saw visions of her father and mother. Large tears began rolling down her cheeks as she drifted into unconsciousness. But the mighty tree looked after its own folk. The oak and the girl dryad drew power from one another, the preserving force of the ancient woodland magic. Echo McCool departed on her own time, but cocooned in this protective place, her soul would never fly from her body, so as long as the tree itself remained alive.